Check. Check 1, 2, check. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live at the Coffee and Biscotti Show. I'm your host, Crew Mel Bellissimo. It is Friday, July the 30th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are shining your beautiful light. It's been a week, my friends. I have to say that of all the shows that I've ever done, today is going to be the most special for me for a number of reasons. I'm sorry that last week I wasn't on, but I promise you that I had good reason. And so on that note, I would like to dedicate today's show to a great man. His name is Dominic Bellissimo. He was born in 1935 and he passed last Saturday in 2021. My father passed here in Ottawa, and I'm going to get through this, I promise. And he was brought into the hospital. They put this mask on to pump oxygen into the lungs because he had degenerative heart failure. And he fought on again for another 50 hours till he passed on Saturday just after 1 p.m. So today's show is dedicated to a great man. There's so much to say about him. I've written a blog based on a picture called All That's Left, which is a beautiful blog as a tribute to my father. Of a beautiful social media post when he passed. And I'm just overwhelmed with the support that was received. I mean, I have to really give some shout outs to Sandra Mio for being there for me and my family last week, and to have you here again, and how wonderful you've been to me and my family. Thank you, Sandra, for everything you do. And to the Wolf Pack, who is a group of people, both men and women, that are leaders in their own right. In fact, today's guest is one of our Wolf Pack leaders, and just for the wonderful support. Really, I think that I'm at peace with my father passing, but I'm more emotional about the fact that I had all this support, and so there's lots to unpack here, my friends. A little bit longer of an introduction, but there really is lots to unpack. First and foremost, just to say that my father was a very simple man, and he wasn't going to solve cold fusion, I'll tell you. But what he did do was he created something very special in his life, and that's something called meaningful relationships. And for those of us who have lived in the big city, where our energy is focused 100% on surviving, we forget the mission. We forget our purpose. We get distracted by the shiny things. And, this is what my dad taught me. He taught me about living a life of passion, to do what I love and love what you do. Because in the end, 42 years dedicated to a company, dedicated to his family, all of his stuff could fit in one small closet. So the understanding that we need to not go after the shiny things. What we need to do is we need to start really focusing on building meaningful relationships. And for those of you that are hard workers, dedicated workers, that you have a job and you work very hard at your job, you dedicate your time and efforts, maybe 50, 60, 70 hours a week, I just want you to know something. I want you to know that in any one of the eulogies, in the obituary that was written for my dad, not once was anything mentioned about what a great employee he was. Nothing. What was mentioned was what a great man he was, that he was loved, and what he did for his community. And so that's the moral of the story. So I'm grateful to my dad for sharing that lesson with me. And it's very fitting because today on the Coffee and Biscotti show, I have a guest who I wrote in my social media posts. Have you ever met somebody that when you just see him and talk to him or just hear his voice, you feel his energy? You just know that this guy is absolutely just an awesome human being. And when I first got introduced to him, it was because he was involved with the as a JA mentor, the Junior Achievement Mentors, with Albert Wong, who of course is an absolutely another amazing human being. And we got on this vision board workshop that I run, and there was lots of people there. There was some really super great people. I have to say, all of them were amazing people. But there's just this thing. I don't know. I don't know if you can touch it. I don't know if you can taste it. You just feel it in your heart. And I felt this man in my heart from the moment that I laid eyes on him. It's kind of like I have a bromance for this guy. He's that good, guys. And the stories that you're going to hear today are stories that are going to absolutely blow your mind. You're going to look at yourself in the mirror and say, man, I need to take a page out of this guest's book because he's that guy. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. What an absolute gem of a human. Thank God that the world has, that people have, my guest, Robert Meredith, because he is just a wonderful human being. And I'm super honored to bring him here on the show because 90 minutes with a guy like this guy is going to cost you a lot of money. You can count on it because he's that important. But you know what's funny? When you hear his story about the things that he's done, all the various boards and executive director position on boards of volunteering, of charities, of what he does, a father of two, a businessman, a financial planner, a strategic planner. I mean, this guy does it all. Do you feel me? He pushes his body to the limits. He says nothing can stop me and nothing is impossible. That's what we need here. That's the kind of energy we're looking for on the planet, especially coming out of a pandemic. And so wherever you are in the world, my fine feathered friends, I want you to get off your comfortable seat and please join me as we welcome the one and the only Rob Meredith. Hi, Rob.
How you doing, Mel?
I'm doing awesome, brother.
It's great to be here.
Did I do? Is that what is Josh? Josh, what do you call it? A blushtro? You know what a blushtro is, Rob?
I think I just received it, Mel. I think that was fantastic. Holy cow! Got to live up to the hype now.
Well, that's easy, my friend. I'm sure you won't have any problem. Thank you for coming on to the show, Rob, and thank you for spending the next 90 minutes with us. I'm really grateful, and I couldn't have picked a better guy to be on the show that's dedicated to my father. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure.
So here we are, my friend, the long-awaited show. We were supposed to do this last week. We had some, let's call it some other previous engagements. But I want to get right into it, Rob, because there's just so much to talk about. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to go into, I do this every week. The first thing that I always say, Rob, is why this platform was created. And it was created because I wanted to have a forum in which people, amazing human beings, could come on and share their story. Talk to them about their transformations, their quantum moments. Talk to them about how they live a life of passion. Talk to them about how they use and leverage their superpowers, their God-given talents to help others. And you embody exactly that. So what I'd love for you to do, brother, is just paint a picture for our friends in the Twitchiverse. Let them know who this Rob Meredith guy really is.
No, happy to do it, Mel. And, I think candidly, I think we're all still figuring that out, right? But a lot of the building blocks that went into, I think, who I am today have come from, trial and error, and looking at a challenge, looking at a problem, and saying, how do I solve for that problem? What are the things that I can do? Because it's a lot easier to change yourself than it is to change everybody around you, right? Or to change the circumstances you're in. But I'm a practical guy. I'm somebody who really believes that effort can solve a lot of challenge. Collaboration can solve a lot of challenge. And maybe I might be best to summarize it this way. I have a life philosophy, which is I want lots of people at my funeral. I want lots of people at my retirement party. And if that's my outcome objective, I work backwards from there. And what it kind of means is if you want to have those outcomes, you can't be a jerk. You can't be only looking out for yourself. You can't be focused on the things that are going to be fleeting. You have to look and play the long game. And the long game to me is, built around and through people, not on their backs, but holding, their hand, shoulder to shoulder, side by side. And, developing those relationships over time to me has been one of the most valuable, I'll say, treasures that I've discovered in my lifetime. So in a nutshell, that's a little bit about who I am.
Yeah, that's quite an intro. Let's just start making some notes, shall we? Work backwards. I love it. I love it. Almost like a reverse engineer.
100%. That's the
That's
way to do
awesome.
it, right? You think about any problem that you face, and we always think about, what's our target? What are we trying to achieve? Whether that's, I know you're a martial arts guy, and I'm learning at your hand there, Mel. But you think about belts. You think about different levels, and you think, okay, well, that's the goal. Well, if I want to get there, what do I have to do to get there? What are the steps that I have to take today? Breaking the macro into the micro. So yeah, I love that.
That's awesome. And so what about a background? Maybe talk to us a little bit about Rob, like your background. I mean, you've done so many things, but I kind of want to sort of give that build up. What were your steps? How did you get to be this super successful, super loved guy? Well, clearly I can understand why you have a beautiful family, a beautiful wife. I mean, you must be some sort of model part-time on the weekends or something. So I don't know, man. You got it all.
I'll take it, Mel. I'll take the compliments, but candidly, it's everybody I think focuses on different aspects of their life at different moments in their life. And for me, early on, I went from being hard into baseball with baseball cards when I was a little guy, right? My parents ran their own business. My father worked in the IT sector, and my mother ran her own children's book business. And so we had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, in our household. She ran a company called Pigtails Books, and it was really interesting. So the pig stand for Parents Involved in Growth. And, I did everything from wearing the big pig costume and, shaking hands with kids as a little guy to pricing books and carrying them upstairs. But it taught me a whole lot about entrepreneurship and, and also hard work. I remember distinctly a moment in my life where I really wanted a pair of basketball shoes. All the kids had the cool Patrick Ewing shoes. I really wanted them. My mother said, here's what we've kind of allowed for as far as, our budget for shoes. But if you want them, you can price books and I'll give you $1 a box. And if you want the extra $50 shoes, you can price books. It's 50 boxes. So you can figure out how long that would take to do. And it was more than a week. So, for me, I looked at that and said, well, there's a great example of, hard work can get you what you're after. But did you really want that? It made you have to pause for a second and say, did I really want to work a week to get kind of fancier shoes? And so you really kind of put things into perspective. And from there, obviously, you go through life and you go through challenge. And that's always, like high school for a lot of people was the same for me. Challenge is always present. But I sort of got into sport, and basketball was one of those things. So I didn't start playing basketball till grade 8, but that was, one of my first sort of challenges was I had to learn that and learn to be part of a team. And of course, you face setbacks. I mean, I had just made the junior team, and during tryouts, I broke my ankle. So now you're off for 6 months, and you're having to fight your way back, and all these kind of things. So
Oh.
I only share that story as kind of an example of adversity will always show up at your doorstep. I think the question becomes, what do you do with the adversity? Do you
Mm.
overcome that challenge? Do you just accept it? Do you roll over? And for me, it's been the opposite of that. It's lean in. Lean into the adversity, lean into the challenge, and just figure out how to overcome the problem. and quite often it's through, a very common set of things, hard work, it's, time and dedication to something, and it's through people. It's always through people. And so that was kind of my foray. And, when you start to kind of, pivot through life, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, one of the challenges I wanted to take on was I wanted to play high level basketball. Well, this was pre-internet and pre all those things. So, how do you get recruited when nobody's paying attention to you? I wrote letters to coaches. I literally just wrote letters and mailed them and said, I really want to, meet you. This is what I do. This is what I think I can do. And that led to recruiting visits. So this was before you could send, a highlight video to people. That's what I tried to do, is create my own opportunity out of what I thought was a challenge.
Wow. I never heard anybody do that. That's remarkable. And so tell us about that. Tell us about that. So what was it like? So where did you get to in basketball?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, for me with basketball, again, wasn't a starter on a high school team. Always because I'm 6'5", and so, but I'm a lanky fella, to say the least, right? So, playing down low was never going to be my forte from a width standpoint. So I recognized pretty early on that I had to get a little faster, had to get a little stronger, and had to play outside. And so I had to work on that part of my game, and so I did. And so again, I mentioned the idea of, sending a bunch of letters. I happened to be at a couple of different camps, the summer before university, and got some notice, got ranked, pretty decently, top 40. And so that led to me being able to go to, University of Windsor and, University of Ottawa, and actually go and scrimmage and try it with the teams. And so I got kind of on what I'll call the bench squad for the University of Ottawa, and played some premier basketball here in Ottawa for the Gloucester Wolverines, was one of their university reps. But candidly, really quickly after my first year of, trying to play university basketball, I realized I'm not going pro anytime soon. I don't think that this is going to be like a life mission for me. And, they had me on weight gain and all these sort of things, try to boost you up. But, after a year of spending, 3 or 4 hours a day at something, and just recognizing like you're probably not going to go to, first round of the NBA draft. It was time to pivot and recognize that, sometimes you do hit a ceiling. It's time to just sort of switch a little bit left or right. And that led down the path of, figuring out what I wanted to do long term, and sort of tasting different ideas and concepts. So that was sort of the first turn in my life, was to say, hey, this idea you had where you thought maybe 2 steps ahead, you probably should think 5 or 6 steps ahead, and start to plot this out and plan it out a little more.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. And so what happened from there, Rob? So you pivoted. So where did you pivot to?
Yeah, I thought to myself, hey, looks pretty neat to be a DJ. And, I was, so, of course,
Man
after
after my
first
own
year of
heart.
university, exactly. But, after your first year of university, you think to yourself, hey, you've had some fun, you're into year two. But I remember distinctly the summer of, my first year of university, my parents gave me an option. They said, well, listen, if you want to rent an apartment with your buddies, no problem. You can pay for it. Or you can come home and you can work for, the family business, and earn money. So I printed off 200 plus resumes. And I remember walking the downtown core, and the only advice I was given from anyone was ask for the manager or the owner, look them in the eye, shake their hand, and, hand them a resume. That was after that, it was like, as long as you have no further, questions, you're good to go. And so that's all I was equipped to kind of walk out there with. So I handed out all these resumes. Of course, knowing what I know now, not maybe the most efficient or effective strategy, but ended up running into somebody from the Lord Elgin Hotel. And that, was kind of the first one where it looked positive. But the only one that actually hired me was the folks at Beaver Tails. So for about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I needed a job, took the job, and then I got a call from the Lord Elgin Hotel. We'd love to hire you to be a bellboy. So that was interesting. And then, of course,
Wow.
now you got a job. And so I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do. But what I really want to do is this DJing thing. So anyways, I begged, borrowed, and stealed, if you will. My roommate had a pair of turntables, wouldn't let me use them, and so he'd made his own mixtape. And I said, "Oh, I'm going to borrow your mixtape, and I'm going to hand it out again through people." I had known a few different folks who kind of worked in that industry, and I said, "Hey, can I get a tryout kind of idea?" And that kind of led down that path to allowing me to, at least get a tryout, and that allowed me to get a night at a nightclub. And then from there, kind of interesting thing, I took the same approach. there was kind of a large, I'll say sort of group here in the city that was doing all the interesting and cool parties. I bought a ticket and I'd gone home and I was pretty good with computers and I'd done sort of a bit of a mixtape for this person. Anyways, we ended up, going exactly over to this nightclub, and I presented him with his name in all the mixes, and I said, "Hey, I'd love to chat with you about this." Well, I guess he listened to it and he said, "Hey, let's meet up on Tuesday." This was on a Friday night, so we did, and that led to a whole bunch of different adventures. But cut to the chase, I ended up doing the live to air on 93.9 on every Saturday night. Ended up doing a couple versions of
Wow.
the Traffic Jam on Hot 89.9. We did the Flow 93.5, live to air on Friday nights a couple of times in Toronto. So really neat experiences, right?
Oh
Like
my
stuff that
God. So were you a big R&B and hip hop DJ?
that was it. And for me, that was, I don't always look the part for that, but that was where my passion was. That's how I grew up. I grew up in Mississauga, and that was kind of the culture that I grew up with, right? And now it's
Yeah,
very
of course.
mainstream, but at the time, wasn't as mainstream, that's for sure. So
That's
very neat.
awesome. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Well, it's basketball culture too, right?
That's right.
Of
Totally.
course, man. It's
100%.
basketball. Okay, so you got to answer me this question. Top three classic rap artists. You're like top three favorites of yours.
Oh, it's got to be Biggie, Jay-Z, and the last one. I'm going to go with a wild card and say a friend of mine, Cardinal Official, just to represent Toronto.
Wow, look at that,
Great
eh?
guy.
So you know him personally, yes? Or you met
I
him?
met him a couple of times and was super down to earth, great guy,
Yeah, he had some
and
big tracks.
proud Canadian.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Hey, Josh, Poutine Nation, maybe we got to get Rob to do a set live on Twitch. Yeah. Do you still have your turntables, Rob?
Oh, you know what? They have found new homes over the years. They have found new
Have they?
homes, but that's okay. Someday the little guys will pick it up too, I'm sure.
There you go. Well, listen, if it's any consolation, Rob, I have a little Pioneer SDJ controller and I run Serato off my computer, so we're good.
There you go. There you go. Good for you.
There you go, man. That's awesome. So, see, this is wonderful because what it represents to me, and I was going to share this at the beginning. Rob, you're this guy who's lived a full life. And when my father passed, I was talking to a friend, which I came up with listening to him about 7 principles, 7 virtues that one must have to lead a full and beautiful life. And I have to say, bro, I mean, you're that guy. You very much, if I can say, remind me of myself. I was a trumpet player. I was a piano player. I went to the Royal Conservatory for 8 years. I was a DJ since me, Ralph, Alejandro, and Rob DeSanto, Nice and Wild DJ company. We were together even at 15 years old. So I did all these different things to love life and to experience what I can. And you did exactly that, bro. And you did it good. Like university basketball. I mean, for you to be on Flow 93.5, you are somebody. You know what I mean? Like that's big time, bro.
Well, I'll tell you, Mel, I don't take a lot of credit for it. It was again the people around me, the opportunities that were put in front of me, and kind of a common string or theme to my life has been, say yes and go for it and take risks. Had I not, been brave enough in the middle of a nightclub to walk up and hand the guy who is about to go on a CD and say, listen, we should chat, you know, it takes a little bit of bravery, maybe not smarts, but bravery, to be able to go and do that kind of stuff and just step outside of your comfort zone, and just do what most people might not do, even though it's what we all inherently feel maybe we should do. So that's kind of been my
Wow.
secret.
Well, and there's a bit to unpack there as well, my friend, because I mean, that's why I kind of make a joke every time when I introduce somebody. I tell people to get off their comfortable seat, because if you're going to get out of your comfort zone, that's where you're going to have the growth. And so you're a perfect example to that. So Rob, after all of this, so you did the DJing thing, you played basketball. In terms of academics, You
Hmm.
studied at the University of Windsor. You started at the University of Ottawa. What was sort of the major? Like, what were you planning to do?
Yeah, in my last year of high school, I worked with the London Police and I worked in the recruiting and training section. And so it was a real eye opener to me because I thought to myself, well, I want to be a police officer. I thought that was a great way to make impact. And I just, every little guy wants to either be a firefighter or a police officer, or a doctor, we always have the costumes, right? And so working with them, I thought that's the path. So I went into criminology. And so I've got a degree in criminology, and I thought that was where I wanted
Wow.
to go. But probably after year two, I recognized that I'm not sure this is what I want to do. And I lived right on Elgin Street here in Ottawa. And so at the time, there was a lot of, nightclubs and bars and all these sort of, interesting things. But you also got to kind of see the not so fun side of that. So what the police have to deal with sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure that's what I want to do. I'm not sure that's the impact I maybe thought I would have. And so I pivoted and I started thinking, well, maybe financial services is the way to go. And so I started to explore this path. And that kind of led to me getting, the right licenses and designations. And I started off with a company here in Ottawa, right out of university. But that was kind of where I went to education wise, and worked in that role for about a year. And I realized really quickly after working probably 14-hour days, 6, 7 days a week for an entire year that I didn't have enough gray hair. That's no longer a problem. But I didn't have enough gray hair. I didn't have the experience,
Yeah.
and talking to people about things that you haven't experienced. It's very difficult to gain credibility in that space, right? If you
Mm.
if you haven't done it, if you haven't lived it, breathed it, and I find that's fairly thematic to a lot of things. If you haven't given it a try, if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't tested it, how do you relay advice on it? And so for me, that's kind of been another theme of my life is try it out, give it a test drive, give it a test, and see if it works for you. And if it does, advocate for it. If it doesn't, then maybe that's not the right thing. Maybe it's
Right.
it's false advertising. So I did that for about a year and recognized it wasn't there. And so we went into I ended up going actually into another part of the family business, which was on my uncle's side. He's a restaurateur, and so I ended up working in restaurants in a management capacity, and probably did that for about 4 years. And it was an interesting path. You learn a lot working in a restaurant.
Oof.
And I'm a huge believer, and I had lots of opportunity. Worked both in the family business, and then made a pivot to go work for another large scale business, and then made another pivot thereafter. That's the root of the restaurant business, right? If you're not expanding, then the opportunities aren't expanding. And
That's
so I
right.
ended up working down in Orlando, Florida, and kind of coming back here to Ottawa. And that was kind of a big learning moment for me. Working with people who have diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences. You work on a kitchen line in the middle of a rush. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn a lot about other people and how to deal with people, how to deal with stress and challenge and pressure. And I know the old adage of, pressure makes diamonds and all this stuff. It also crushes people, in the
Right.
wrong opportunities. And so I distinctly remember one moment where I remember a line cook walking off, throwing his apron down, being, "I'm done." And I pulled him aside. I said, "No, we got to get through this together." And I remember taking over the line. I wasn't a kitchen guy through and through, but started calling line, and we got out of that problem. And I remember the feeling afterwards being like, wow, we did that. And it was you talk about team building exercises. There's no better team building exercise than that. So that experience really, I take so many things away. The fact that, in a restaurant, you may have front of house people and back of house people who may see their worlds as very different, but the reality is you're all part of one big family. And just because you're out there, dealing with, the stress of customer service, and you're dealing with the stress of pressure in a kitchen, it's all the same pressure. It's all the same
Yeah.
stress and different masking. And so if you can kind of come together and be collaborative, man, you can work as such a great unit. And so I really love that part about it. But I think anybody who does work in that industry it's a challenging and stressful job. I mean, you're working evenings, you're working weekends, you're working holidays. It's tough to kind of build a family dynamic in doing that. And so I purposely took some time off, and I said, well, I'm going to take about, let's call it, 3 to 6 months off, and I'm going to network full time. So the story goes this
Wow.
way, Mel. It's kind of an interesting one. Sitting in the Philadelphia airport, I remember distinctly, you always kind of get delayed in Philadelphia, and there was a chair there. So this was back before you'd have like multiple charging stations. You'd have to kind of put your dollar or two into the machine. It was one of those like massage chairs, but you could charge your phone. And so, of course, you charge your phone while you've got an opportunity, and you're laid over for 2 or 3 hours. And I started to do the math, and I realized, wait a second. I can figure out based on sort of my income, my bonus, whatever the income source was, divided by the number of hours I worked, I could figure out what my life was worth to somebody else per minute or per second, which I'll tell you is a really defeating exercise. So if you're out there, watching, there's good and bad to this for sure, right? But what
Yeah,
I really
yeah,
realized was, by selling my time, however we describe that, you can really kind of put a worth on what you are worth. And, you start to, feel like that's maybe where I'm at. And I didn't like that at all. Like I felt really uncomfortable with that. And so, I was fortunate to have great people around me, again, sort of thematic to my life, my sister and my brother-in-law who shared a concept with me, which was the idea of consultative networking. So, the thesis kind of goes like this. It's, create the things, the attributes of the job you're looking for. Not knowing what the title is, not knowing what the industry is, like be totally agnostic to that. But think about the attributes. And so I made my top 5 list of things I wanted in a career, and I made a list of 3 things I didn't want in a career. And of course, the trick to it is don't have the inverse. If I don't want, if I want freedom, I don't want a micromanager. Like they can't be totally inverse. But I wanted, the idea to, control my own destiny. I wanted to be able to help people. That was a really key thing. I
mm,
wanted to be able to not be paid based on the quantity of my work, but rather the quality of my work and the impact I was able to make. I wanted to be able to eventually call my own shot, control my own destiny, spend time with family. I wanted, in simplistically, what I would share is I would tell people, if I can get the job done better, more efficiently, get a better outcome, either pay me more or let me go home. Like give me one of these two outcomes, right? Is really what I
yeah.
wanted. And so I was really resistant to the idea of selling my time. I was really resistant to the idea of, as you shared about your dad, just dedicating time to a job rather than to an outcome or to people. And so that's really what I sort of saw it. So, well, sir, go ahead now.
No, I love it. I love it. Dedicating what you just said, that last line was perfect. Dedicate, you said dedicating time to, um,
To outcomes and to people,
to outcomes. That's right. Not to the job.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
That's
it.
brilliant.
Well, I'll tell you, what that led to though was probably about 73 or 74 different conversations, coffees, lunches, going for a beer, going for a breakfast, sitting down with people. And what I did was I said, I'm looking for people who have these attributes to what it is they're doing in their career now. I don't know what the career is, it doesn't matter to me. It's more, do you have the attributes? And if you do, I'd love to sit down and hear about your path. Let me follow the breadcrumbs of your life, understand your career biography, if you will. And let me figure out what those turns and twists were. Where did you say yes? Where did you make a tough choice or decision? And I would interview people. And I'd always start off saying, I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for you to, because otherwise, people start thinking, who do I know in HR? Who can I introduce this person to? I wasn't interested in that. What I was really interested in was hearing about their story. And then from there, you
Amazing.
can start to, ask the same question, who else should I be talking to about this? Who else has the same sort of, dynamic to what it is that they do? And I just feel that you can learn from people. If you you got 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Use them in the right proportion. So to me, I tried to be a really strong listener and take the advice. Now, of course, by the end of that, lots of different interesting job opportunities came out of that. But the first person I met, introduced me to another person who gave me an opportunity. And that led me down the path of where I'm working here today. So that was kind of my foray into pivoting from one sector to another. But it was just, it was hard work, and it was through people.
So just to be clear here, Rob, what
Yeah.
you're telling me is that you took 3 to 6 months of time off of working, and you basically said, I am going to have coffees, lunches, beers, teas with as many people as I can so that I can network and connect with people that sort of resonate, that have these qualities that you're looking for. Are you for real? Holy shit balls.
Well,
That's awesome, man. Like I want to explain to you. I feel that because I came to Ottawa 3 years ago. I had just sold my school, decided that I was going to go into create a metaphysical type business, which flopped magnificently. It flopped with passion. It flopped. And I didn't know what to do. And wow, the fact that you went and took the time to do this is really a testament, though, to who you are, Rob, because I'm a networker. I'm a connector. I love connecting with people. I think that that's why we connect so closely. That's why I say we have this bromance, is because like you were a DJ, I was a DJ. I worked in the restaurant, you worked in the restaurant business. You know, you're an athlete. Like we have so many things in common. It's really like actually remarkable at how much we do have in common. And that's really powerful. So you did all this, which led you to where you are now. And talk us through a little bit about what it is that is. So what's the, it's a financial planner, but I know a lot of financial planners. They're not like you.
Well, I appreciate that, Mel. And it's interesting because, our industry is famous for jargon, for titles and things like that. There's a lot of vice presidents who may not be vice presidents, right? There's a lot of financial advisors and planners. And I always describe my job really simplistically this way. People bring me, their box of receipts, and you've probably heard me say this before. Here's all my stuff. And I may not even know what the problem is I'm looking to solve. I always describe that the math element of our job is relatively straightforward, predictable, easy to translate. The challenge is most people don't necessarily know what they're trying to solve for. And so the core competency that I think, I try to exhibit, or at least I try to, hone in on, is communication. Being a really good interviewer, being able to ask, direct and purposeful questions that lead people to, knowing the direction they're seeking to go. It could be as simple as people who say, I want to be comfortable in retirement, and simply following up and clarifying, like, how do you define comfort? What does comfort mean to you? And some people, it's having a bucket of money in their checking account, knowing that if anything goes wrong, I can touch it, I can feel it. For some people, it's I don't want debt. For some people, it's I really need my youngest child to, own a home, or to be settled in a career, or to have a life partner that they're comfortable with. Retiring comfortably, although it sounds like it's a financial question, quite often has so many other elements to it. And so it's really discovering that, it's figuring that piece out and saying, like, let's really define it, let's get it down on paper. And if nobody's had that depth of conversation with you before, sometimes that can be a bit cathartic for people. But I think at the same time, it also allows them to figure out a starting point. And maybe best described this way: if we know where we are today, then we've got one of the GPS coordinates, but we also need to know where we're going to, recognizing there's going to be curves and twists in the road. There's going to be, traffic at this spot. There's going to be this piece where we're going to take a detour. That's life. It never runs A to B in a straight line. But I think if we have an idea as to where we're hopeful to get to, then we can start to plan it and make it work. And then part of my role is to take the experiences that I've had over the years working with clients and working with, similar types of situations, and say, here's how we would apply that. Maybe here's something you haven't thought through. We have a lot of people who, I'll give you a great example. I want to plan till I'm 100. And so the first question is, how long did mom and dad live to? How long did grandma and grandpa live to? Like, is that a reasonable expectation? Because there's a mathematical consequence to getting that wrong. If I plan to live to 100, but nobody in the family's lived to 80, you might be planning for cash flow for 20 years that you're never going to spend. And as a result, you're going to live maybe a more suppressed life. You're going to work longer. Maybe you don't aspire to work longer. I think it really does get back down to choice. And then not applying your own personal bias is a really important piece. So just because you have enough money to retire doesn't mean that many people, like, there's a lot of folks who won't. Work provides them purpose. It becomes, their reason to get out of bed in the morning. And to me, that's the battery that they want to recharge every day. So maybe it's working less, maybe it's having control over your time. And so those are the things that we really try to, I'll say, extract from people through conversation and dialogue, to really define the path, define those GPS coordinates, as to where you are today. That's very mathematical. We're just going to collect documentation and figure out where you are and the inflows and the outflows and things of that nature. But then you move to the next piece, which is, where are you looking to travel? What does that path look like? Even if you say, I want to travel in retirement, have you tried traveling now? I can think of a client who aspired to buy a very fancy car. And, about 2 months after he bought it in retirement, I said, "How do you like that car?" And he goes, "It's okay." And that was an eye opener for me. I
Those
said,
are the Patrick Ewing shoes, right?
you aspire for, you think it's exactly that, the thing you think you want, but you've never even tried it on. You've never rented the car. You never took it for a test drive. It was aspirational. And now you have it, and it's like, huh,
Mm.
yeah, that's it. So yeah,
Wow.
that's a little bit about it.
So, see, this is it. This is really, really important, Rob. And I think for everybody listening, like to provide some of this information, because I think that, what came to mind first is the idea of clarity.
Mm.
Having clarity in your life is what's important. And that's why I coined myself a clarity coach, because what I do, Rob, is the exact same thing, just not in very strategically for finances. But what I do say is that, okay, so you're a 45-year-old man. Great. How much money do you want to make a month? What's the number? Do you have a number? And they go, well, I never really thought about having a number. But then how do I know, this is what we need to talk about, like, where's that clarity on what's that number you're looking for? I know my number. And as soon as I get it, guess who I'm coming to? Hi, yes. Is this Rob Meredith, secretary? Yes, this is Crew Mel Bellissimo calling. I'd like to make an appointment.
But you're right on, Mel. I mean, you look at it and say having a number is certainly important, but it's what it's tied to. Why is that the number? And I always feel like the obnoxious little brother asking the question, why, how, those kind of things. But getting to really, I'll say, the reason behind it. And there's always a reason behind it. Again, going back to comfort. Why do some people need to have this amount of money to feel comfortable? Other ones, different place to go. And so that's always what I go back to, is really understanding where it is you're looking to travel to is really important.
And just to sort of give a shout out. So Remy's on here, Mr. Ignite the Web. Misplaced purpose plus needs are very dangerous.
Agreed.
And our dear friend and moderator, Putin Nation, says, which incidentally requires the exact muscles Rob spent 6 months building at the outset of this journey, communicating effectively and being meaningful with people to help folks gain clarity around these things. Absolutely. You're a master at this. You're a master at this.
Well, it's, you just have to practice. It's repetition, right? Like sport, if you practice things, it's funny, people always ask you, how are you an expert? This is a question I ask myself. How do you become an expert in something? And, you mentioned at the outset, doing junior achievement. So that's a question I asked to the youth that I support. And in company program, I said, how do you know if you're an expert? And people will say things that are really funny, you're on television, or you wrote a book. And I go, if you wrote a book, you're an author. It doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert. You might have interviewed experts, it's possible. Maybe you've got a degree in something, possibly. But if it's your first day after the degree, are you the expert, or is the guy who's worked 40 or 50 years doing this craft the expert, right? And so I just think it's your experience, it's where you've gone to. And so I think, you're right on. If you've got the ability to kind of lean into these experiences and say, hey, I've seen this before, it's another one of those. It's another one of these, and you can say, all right, well, let's dig into it and find out how this is slightly different, and be interested, be genuinely interested in not only getting the understanding correct, but also understanding what the person is trying to solve for, and they may not have it right, it may involve us kind of going back and forth and explaining examples. And I don't know, I find that to be the most interesting part of the chess game, is just understanding how they want to set up the board. And if you can figure that out, then you can help them get where they want to be.
Awesome. I love that, because I always use this equation that wisdom equals knowledge experienced. And for me, I like that, because I know a lot of people who read a lot and they're great readers, but their nose is in the books all the time. And so I can appreciate that, because I wish I could take a little bit, a few pages out of their book and be a better reader, because I've always been told leaders are readers. But the truth is that that's all they do. They don't have any life experience. And so I went the other way. I went your route, Rob. I wanted to gain as much experience, and that's what you've done. So that's the beauty of what it is. You developed wisdom because you went, you studied, you had knowledge, then you went to experience, and that to me is an expert, right? And I will tell you, I don't know if I ever told you this story, Rob, but the guy at the bank one day said to me, was this dude, and I think you'll appreciate this, Rob, as a financial planner. He said to me, listen, Mel, you got some money in the bank. I know that you're interested in purchasing a property. Can we just sit down for 5 minutes? I said, okay, Michael, whatever you want, brother. I'm going to give you the 5 minute, the 5 minutes that you need to give your spiel. And I remember him telling Mel, we should go into 12-month GICs and blah, 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 blah. And I don't even understand. All this financial stuff really is Chinese to me. I know jab, I know elbow, I know uppercut. I know these things very well. But I said to him at the end, I just asked one question. I said, thank you, Michael. Can I ask you one question? He says, absolutely. I said, are you a millionaire? And he says, no. I said, well, I want to be a millionaire. So if you're not a millionaire, then you don't know how to get there. So then why would I take your financial advice? And he went, oh, shit, nobody's ever said that to me before. And to be honest with you, Rob, that's very powerful for me because you said it. You talked about sports. Martial arts is no different. We have a line that says repetition is the mother of all skill. Mm-hmm. And that if you want to be a better player, if you want to be a better basketball player, you got to play with players that are better than you.
Absolutely. Well, learn from their experiences, right? And, and also make sure that you're targeting correctly, that you're looking at the right targets. And, I always laugh when people say, I want to be a millionaire. I'm always just curious. I'm like, why? Why? What is it that attracts you to the $1 million? Is it a status thing? Is it a comfort thing? Is it what it allows you to do? And so it's interesting, I'll tell you my philosophy, which is I always want to be able to make sure that, my bills are paid and my kids have opportunity and that I can use money as a tool, in a positive sense. I think if I don't have to worry about whether, in my volunteer work, I'll speak a little bit about that I can contribute, that I can, not just, fund a raffle, but take out, my buddy Fred for a beer, and not have to worry about whether or not, the visa is going to go through, that's success to me. If I can, and I have a life rule, anytime somebody recommends a book, I buy the book, and I've got probably 6 ahead of me that I still have to read, but to me, that's one thing where if somebody's taken the time to recommend it, they think it's really insightful, it's impacted them. I want a piece of that knowledge. And like you, I'm sure I wish I could just plug it in like the Matrix in the back of the head and just download the knowledge, and save myself, a week of reading, a piece at a time. But that's not how it works, right? And if you can invest the time and do that, fantastic. But it starts with saying yes to having, a rule in following this and taking people's advice genuinely. Everybody's had experience, different experiences. And I think if you can kind of look at your life as a collage, and say, what do I want to take from different people's experience and apply to my own life? I think that's the super powerful part. Learn from other people's mistakes, but learn from their successes. Learn from what went right for them, not just what went wrong for them. I hear that a lot. I want to, learn from their mistakes so you don't make it. I go, well, would you make the same mistake? Would you have gone left? Maybe you would have gone right. Let's talk about that. But let's also learn about what they did. What was successful for them? Where did they say yes?
Well, a good friend of ours, Tuan, always said that he had this wonderful line that says, success leaves clues.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting, Rob, because, first of all, money was explained to me once in a class, and I loved this definition of it because money was described to me as an amplifier of one's personality. Mm. So what is it that you do? Yes, it's a tool. You use it to exchange. Those who were a little bit more metaphysical talked about how it was an exchange of energy. But I love this idea of an amplifier of one's personality because, and we're going to move right into your volunteerism with that statement, because if you ask me why I wanted to become a millionaire, because I want to be able to not have to worry to leave the air conditioning on at the house. I want to make sure that I don't ever have to worry about that stuff. But I think that most importantly, I want to be able to, or I want to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire so that I can help bring other people up. That's this. And in order to do that, you need money to do it. So that's why that's why I'm going to make a lot of money.
Well, I love that, Mel. And what I would always say is just make sure you don't overshoot the landing. And it's a funny phrase, right? Like, but it's something that I think about all the time, which is,
Yeah.
what if it doesn't take $1 million to do that? What if it takes a tenth of that? What if it takes 1% of that? Like, who knows, right? Like,
Right.
defining what you're looking to do, because if you overshoot the landing, that means you're working for a lot longer than maybe you're required to in order to achieve your target. And so, too much is just as challenging as too little on occasion, right? So that's always what I think of is, let's really define where you're looking to go, and get into that detail, because I do agree with you. It magnifies your personality and arguably can change your personality.
Mm.
That's another interesting feature I find of money is, what was once your problem, I don't have enough, becomes a new problem, which is I have too much, and what are people really liking me for? Like, or do we really have this relationship because you like me, or do we have this relationship because I pick up the dinner bill? And people
Right.
change their outlook, and so all we're really doing is a problem exchange. At the end of the day, money becomes simply a tool in your toolkit to achieve certain things. Sometimes it's survival, though. So it's really easy to wax poetic when, you're sitting in a position where you have a roof over your head. And so I always describe it this way, the difference between having $5,000 per year in income and $50,000 per year in income may be a roof over your head. It is a significant impact to your life, but
Mm.
50,000 to 500,000, nicer roof, better food, that's really the difference. And maybe arguably more opportunity, but just it's not as life critical. And so that's why we should go back to, defining the path. And that takes time. That's not an overnight mission, but
Mm.
I think that's actually the fun part.
And so, but it took you down a path as well, Rob, because you're doing so much of this volunteering and you sit on boards. Talk a little bit about all this wonderful stuff that you do for the community.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Maybe I'll start with sort of my foray, into the world of volunteering. So, as a young lad, my mother and I would go and volunteer together at a homeless shelter in London, Ontario, where I grew up. And so we would go down together. I believe it was Wednesday nights, and I loved it. It was a great opportunity. We would both work in the front, and we would serve meals together, and we'd sit down and chat with people and play cards or board games. And to me, it was the best volunteering. It was very social. And so I loved that component. And from there, I'll maybe fast forward a number of years to really where things picked up significantly for me, because I've always had a bit of, volunteerism, I think, in my life. But where it really picked up for me was my second oldest sister, gave birth to a beautiful young boy named Conrad. But Conrad was born with Down syndrome. And so as a younger brother, being in Ottawa, she was in Toronto, I said to myself, like, what can I do to show my support, to show I care, to show my love, to show my support for my sister? And I recognized that if I could gain knowledge in this space, if I could, use my time, my energy, all of that towards learning more about this world, I suspected that would be beneficial. So, at the time, I was dating my wife, Holly, and she is a developmental support worker and a personal support worker. And I said, Holly, like, where can I spend my time? Where can I volunteer? And she did a whole bunch of research and came back with a few different ideas. And one of them was a group that's now known as Able To. And this is supporting people with disabilities, a great local charity here in Ottawa. And that part of their matching program. And their matching program involved simply being a friend to somebody who was looking to find a friend as well. And I thought to myself, wow, I can do that. I can be a friend to somebody. That sounds like, pretty easy volunteering, all things considered, right? And so went through the process, and the process was this, going through, a bit of a background check just to make sure that everybody here is safe and secure in that environment, going through a bit of an interview process, really fairly seamless stuff. And I remember sitting down distinctly at their offices and having a few social workers present different case files to me. And what was amazing to me was each one of these just hit you directly in the heart and in the gut at the exact same time. But as they read them out, there was a gentleman's name that they read. His name was Ted LaMarche. And I remember Ted from my restaurant days. He used to come in at the Maryville Road location of this restaurant and roll cutlery. And so the name just rung a bell. I'm like, that's my buddy Ted. I remember him. And so I thought, this has got to be meant to be. Ted was waiting, I believe it was 16 years to find a match. So just incredible stuff. You can imagine somebody, just wanting a friend and having to wait 16 years to find that match. So it was a blessing to be able to kind of reconnect with him. So we sort of formalized that. We met at his house. He remembered me. I remembered him. Well, now we got together every weekend, almost without fail. Of course, life comes up, and schedules don't always work. But for 10 years, and
10 years?
yeah, in fact, I believe
Wow.
it would have been 11 this past year. So what's amazing about this is that was not volunteering. It was volunteering at outset, but it became absolutely, he was our family. From that, he had a roommate. So Ted was blind, developmentally delayed, and virtually deaf, and by the end of his life was wheelchair bound. But you would never know that about Ted. Ted was, a beaming guy who just embraced life, embraced people, would do anything for you, would give you advice, like great advice. Hey, did you get groceries today? Did you get gas today? Hey, don't park at the airport because it's expensive. You should take a cab. Like great advice, almost like an older brother. But he had a roommate whose name was Fred. So you can imagine two blind gentlemen living together, cleanest apartment you've ever seen, but the greatest guys. And so, fast forward 2 or 3 years, Fred was looking for that same kind of relationship. I said, Fred, we're seeing each other every week. Do you want to formalize this? And he said, yeah, let's do that. And so I ended up with two buddies as a result of that. So just to kind of tell you, the depth of relationship that we had and how they were truly family. They were there for my kids' baptisms. They were there for birthday parties. Fred is an incredible guitar player. And so, funny story, at my wedding to Holly, when the music all went down and it was our time to have our first dance, and there was no music, the system didn't work for whatever reason, he played Brown Eyed Girl on his guitar, and that was our first dance. Those guys were at my wedding, front and center, lifelong friends. So that's the depth of relationship he can form. But to take it a step further, this past year was a really tough one for everybody, no doubt. But 2020, I went through a very similar challenge. Ted fell ill and had infection all throughout his body. We didn't know that at the time. So he was taken, by ambulance to the hospital, was there for a few stays, and Ted hated hospitals more than anything. Like that was not his place. So, trying to calm him down and be by his side. You can imagine doing COVID tests when you don't know what's happening, or you're unaware of that, and you're not comfortable in that environment. And of course, there was a history of abuse in their lives, having come from Rideau Regional Institute. And so being sensitive to all that was a challenge. But, Ted fought a really good fight. But, by September of last year, October of last year, I remember the call coming in, and the most compassionate folks you'd ever meet at the Ottawa Hospital. I'm forever grateful for them. But I'll tell you that this is the spirituality of my life. The nurse in his room was a former client of mine. The floor manager on that floor was a former client of mine. He was on the exit floor to be exited to go to an external care provider, and just because there was another COVID outbreak, he was forced to stay, and they kept him on that floor. So just all the worlds aligned around this. But I did get that unfortunate call saying, you know, we can keep Ted going, but it's a matter of time. And we do need to make a choice. And so we got together, shed a lot of tears, but we made that choice, and we made that choice in November. And I made a commitment to Ted. I said, Ted, I'm going to be with you each and every day, until you pass. And that was over 90 days, Mel. Every day driving to the Ottawa Hospital, donning PPE, going in there and spending time with him, cutting his hair, giving him a shave, holding his hand, bringing him a beer. Ted was a simple guy. He loved a bag of chips and he loved a cold beer. And I thought to myself, this is what life is about. These are the relationships, having somebody who can hold your hand when the time is coming near, and just be with you, not because of what you've done for them, not because of some other earthly idea, but because of the bond you share. And so that was the depth of relationship I had with my buddy Ted. And when he passed, it was a very sad time for sure. But the day before he passed, I'll never forget it. The sun was out. He was happy. You could see a smile on his face. He was just touching his skin. We'd given him a nice, the authentic shave. He
Yeah.
felt like a man. And, I always used to say that to him. I'd say, you know what, this is about you. This is about you, having a legacy. This is about people knowing about what an amazing human being you are. and about me telling your story. So I made a commitment to Ted that day, and I'm sure we're going to get into more volunteer stuff at the different
Mhm.
organizations I support. But I asked him, I said, "Hey, Ted, how do we make your voice louder? What would you like? What do you want your legacy to be?" And he said something that will always stick with me. He goes, "Rob, I want people to have what we have." And I thought, wow, that's amazing. I said, "Ted, just so we're on the same page, what do we have?" And he goes, "We have a friendship. We have a friendship that will kind of, in his own words, I'm paraphrasing, but will last forever." And so what I wanted to do was be able to share that story. And so, we'll go from the touching to the funny part. So years before that, we went, and Ted was a bowler. He loved bowling. He loved all sorts of stuff. But he was a sports guy. And so he really loved the idea of, being seen. So we wanted to join the Ottawa race weekend. So we ended up going and doing the family fun run. So Ted was a heavy fella. He was about 280, 290. He was a big guy, and he was in a wheelchair. And I said, "Well, how can I push you for the 2K in the wheelchair?" So I had not been a runner before that, and I thought, "Oh, okay, this will be no problem. It's 2 kilometers. How bad could it be, right?" So we started going, and I started realizing this was a lot harder than I thought it would be, pushing him down Elgin Street. It was a hot day. So, but if you're pushing a wheelchair, both hands are on the chair. So you can't like wipe your brow or wipe anything away. So everybody's cheering for you, right? You got your name on your shirt. So people are going, "Go, Ted, go." And he was beaming. He was totally in his element. And so that motivated me just to keep going and push through. So as I'm nearing the finish line, right by by the water, the medical team started coming over to me being like, "Are you okay?" Because I was just, sweating buckets. You couldn't wait. I said, "No, no, I'm good. I'll just swipe my brow." And we finished and we crossed the finish line. I said, "Ted, we did it, buddy." And he goes, "Yeah, that was great." I said, "That was pretty hard." And he goes, "I probably should have taken my brakes off." So I ran the 2 kilometer race. He had his brakes on the entire time. So that was like a
Oh,
running joke for us for years and
oh
years
my
and years.
God.
So, when we started to plan this whole thing out, we were joking about that and, sitting in the hospital room sharing that story. And, I'll tell you another story about my foray into running, but I said, "Well, what if I ran a marathon?" And we raised some money and some awareness for this incredible, organization, Able To, and this matching program to give people more of what we had. He goes, "That's what I'd love to do." And so when he passed, that became the new mission. The mission was to go and do that exact marathon. And I'm sure we'll get into how I got into all of that, but that's one example of how the impact that this can have to your life. It is far beyond volunteerism and just showing up, and I do those things too. Don't get me wrong. I camp money each year with my good friend Catherine at Camp Christie Kids, the canoe races. We've done it for years and years. I've been part of junior achievement for forever and a day, so I'm really passionate about that. But there's a few different pieces there, but those are the impactful ones. Those are the life-changing ones. And so that's to me what I'm passionate about.
Wow. What a touching story. That's wonderful, Rob. And so you've mentioned a few other ones, but I know that because there's a couple routes I want to take here, and we can go either way, Rob. But I really want to sort of really talk about the boards that you sit on. Talk a little bit about some of these, just to get it out there so that the people can maybe even get involved themselves or connect with you and see how they can help. Because I'll say this, Rob, just as you continue to share this information with us, that I find it most remarkable that a lot of people don't even really know how to help. That's the truth. You can try to raise money. We tried to bring money, a check down to a women's shelter, and they said, "Well, you can't really come here because we don't know if you have any relation to any of the ladies, and it's sort of like a secret space." So we're going, wow, like, how do you do? Well, we can't even give money. So what do we do? So that's why I really want you to sort of dive in a little bit to some of the things that you're doing and some of the boards, if you could.
Happy to do so, Mel. So, I am fortunate to be the executive chair for Able To, so the same organization that I've volunteered with for years. I'm also on the board for Canadian Guide Dogs for the Blind. And I'm also a sort of participant in a few different committees, one of which is Lifetime Network. So helping people and families who are dealing with disability from a financial perspective and just making sure that they're well planned. And so for me, those are the organizations that I'm passionate about. But Junior Achievement would probably be the other one, an Ottawa Network for Education. So with our good friend Albert, and part of that involves, specific areas that I'm passionate about. And so I think one of the things that I would share is having a connection to a cause is an important thing.
Mm.
Understanding what you want to help, not just that you want to volunteer. So very similar to the approach I would take with, job or career. It's the idea of figuring out what it is that you want to do. What is the impact you want to make? And that can be very straightforward. I want to, donate my time, and maybe you're a social person, maybe you're not a social person, you're an introvert, you're an extrovert, maybe you like one-on-one stuff, you don't. There's always something that can match that. And so I think don't be afraid to say yes. Don't be afraid to take the first step. And the first step might be a Google search. Like that's fair enough,
Mm.
but take that first step and commit to doing it,
Yeah.
and commit to something. You might not know what that something is. You're never going to get in over your head. But I think, if you can sit back and say, this is what I want to do, great. So, I look at my skill sets and say, am I able to help with governance? I'm okay with that. I'm not the best. Am I good with understanding strategic direction? Well, it's what I do professionally, really understanding, being inquisitive, figure out what people are trying to achieve and then seek to solve for that issue. So that lends itself to being helpful to organizations as well. So whether they're organizing finance committees, whether they're trying to figure out, how to run a budget, whether they're trying to figure out how to raise funds,
Right.
start a new program, gain volunteers, they're all just challenges that involve, having a process and creating a strategy to support the process. And so that's one piece. So where I'm reluctant myself is I am again a little adverse to just, here's my time and I'll stand here with a sign. I'd rather see my thoughts and abilities put to work in that way. And I think everybody should probably look at that. Some people love that. They'd rather just be the person who's got a big smile who makes other people smile when they first walk in.
Right.
And I think that's
Yeah.
a skill. But I kind of go the other way as well and say, figuring out how you can be impactful may not be something you come up with right away. Maybe that's done through experience. Maybe that's done
Yeah.
through talking with people in that organization. So those are the organizations that I support quite frequently. So my passions are really, supporting people in the disabled community. That's a huge passion of mine, and brings me great joy. And helping youth, and helping young people get started. I'm such a big believer that career can be a solution to a lot of problems for people. Everybody just needs somebody to put them under their wing and say, here's where you need to go. Let's
Right.
talk about this, or let me introduce you to this person. Back
Mm.
to problems are solved through people, and I just believe that if I can be somebody who helps people, back to funeral and retirement party, if you helped somebody get where they want to be, there's no instant gratification there. There's no business strategy to be had there, but there's certainly a life strategy to be had. There's certainly some benefit to the long game. And if we're really focused on that long game and helping people become better, almost like your campsite, leave it better than you found it.
Right.
If you can kind of have that philosophy, then you're going to do these things. You're going to give of your time freely. Because it's not a job, it's not volunteer work. It's a volunteer experience. And I think that's the way I often view it. Whether that's mentorship one-on-one, which I do quite regularly with a lot of young people, or whether that's actually formally, going out there and volunteering your time with an organization. All of this is, kicking the ball ahead and making the world a bit of a better place.
That's wonderful, Rob. I mean, it's funny because it comes at an interesting point in my life too to hear all this because my father, who was a bit of a medical anomaly himself, had one heart attack, five kinds of cancers, four strokes, and hematoma in the brain. And so now there's been a few people that have asked me, is there a place that we can donate to? And, the first thing that I said was we did some study on a lot of these large organizations. And I think that the organization we had talked about was like the Salvation Army that, like, I think it's 10 cents or less than 10 cents on the dollar actually goes to helping people. The rest of it is called administrative work, or administrative costs. So for me, I'm going to be spending some time, and maybe with your help, Rob, come up with a charitable foundation that is local that deals with either cancers or strokes. Because that's what my father went through a lot of.
Well, and I'll tell you, Mel, it's a common message we hear from people who are donors who are worried about how their funds are going to be utilized, right? And to your point, how much of this is going to administrative costs versus actionable costs? But what's never debatable is how your time is going to be used. And so
That's
that's
right.
why I always go back and say, if you're reluctant with your dollars, use your time.
Yeah.
If you're reluctant with your time, fair enough, maybe you use your dollars. But I go back and say, if you really want to see the inside workings and the impact of an organization's work, volunteer with them and contribute your time. No better litmus test than your own sort of line of sight on something, right? And then you can experience it. You can figure out, is this something I want to support financially? I've given of my time. And arguably that's more valuable, right? But I kind of go
Love that.
back and say, let's look at that. Let's look at the impact you can make, but also the knowledge you can glean from that. If that's something that allows you to kind of see behind the Iron Curtain, and you're happy with what you see, maybe
Mm.
that encourages you to do more. Maybe it encourages you to do less, right? But and take a bit of a pivot and go to a different path. But that's usually my advice: is try it out with your time first, and then that can allow you to kind of.
Oh, we lost him. Something happened, folks. Hopefully, he'll come join us back. We're going to get to an interesting part here, folks, because what's going to happen is that I'm going to talk to him. Hold on, Robbie. I lost you. You're coming back. I'm going to be
Sorry about
talking
that,
to
Mel.
Rob. That's okay, brother. I'm going to be talking to Rob about a little bit about sort of his journeys in terms of, his mental strength, the idea of creating or developing mental strength. Because what's interesting, Rob, is it's the perfect segue actually to you go into the story, the background. We talk a little bit about all these things and experiences and opportunities that have come your way and how you dedicated your time. But in the end, it all comes about or it all comes to be because of having a particular mindset. And I want to talk about that mindset because that's what you do extremely well, is you push yourself to the absolute limits. So I want to bring up a story. It was a LinkedIn story that you put out about, basically, and I'm just going to ad lib here, that it's basically that you climbed the height of Mount Everest in a 48-hour period. Did I say that correctly?
You're spot on, Mel. You got it.
Like, what? Do you want to take us down that or up that journey?
Yeah, let me share. So this was, an interesting one. I was never an endurance athlete. I'll start with that. But I was, I guess maybe what I'll share is I've got a bit of a instant response to most things, which is yes. Rightly or wrongly. Usually, when people ask, "Hey, would you like to try or do?" 100%.
I
And
mean,
then I
you're a
have
yes
to.
man.
Well, that's it, right? Like, just embrace life. You never know how many minutes you got on the clock. There's no best befores, on the back of my neck. So I figure, you got to, take in life as much as you can. And so, when I got pulled into my boss's office and they said, "Hey, we've got this crazy thing, I can't really tell you too much about it, but are you interested in doing it?" So I said yes. And
Rob,
so
crazy? Yeah, cool.
that's right. So then they explained to me what it was, and I started to get a little knocky kneed. So the idea was you're going to climb from the equivalent of sea level to the top of Mount Everest, which is 29,029 feet. So the event is called 29029, and it's become quite big and popular at the time. I think it was the second or third year it had gone on. And so what happens is this: you pay your money. They rent a ski hill for the weekend. So a very large ski hill, and you and 200 other people camp out at the base of this ski hill, and you have about, I want to say, 35 hours or so, so about a day and a half to go and do 17 summits of this hill. And it's a bit of a challenge because the 17 summits, they're
Oh my
1.4
God.
miles up. There's 1,750 feet of vertical each time you do it, and it's rinse and repeat. Now, in this 35 hours, you have to eat, you have to sleep, you have to go to the bathroom, you have to recharge, and you can imagine it's basically running a marathon uphill. Now, of course, you've got the time to do it, and you don't have anything else on your calendar that weekend, so it is pure focus on that event. So, but it's intimidating, right? So I
Yeah.
started to think this through, and again, somebody who's a bit of a problem solver. I said to myself, all right, well, how do I go and do this? So I thought, okay, be a cheater, go to the internet, somebody's done this before, so I read blog posts, and there was a couple, but nothing that was all that insightful. And so I thought to myself, all right, well, let's figure this out. So I live not too far away, probably 6 kilometers away from Carlington Park, probably the largest hill that's in this area. And so I
Yeah.
bought a 50-pound weight vest, and I would go out there every night. So I didn't want to sacrifice time with my kids or my family to train for this. And I said, well, I'll go out at 10 o'clock at night and put a headlamp on and just grab a pair of poles or not and wear this big vest and just climb this hill. And I would run. And I bought found on Kijiji a squat rack. I figured I needed to have strong legs and I needed to have good cardio. So I would go running. So I got I thought I needed to really drop some weight. So I, at the time, was probably close to 230 pounds, which at 6'5", like that evens out.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd say so.
I got down to 198 pounds. So I dropped a lot of weight. I didn't. I've got pictures of me in the pouring rain, climbing up there, just doing a selfie with the Queens Away in the background at the top of that mountain, and just recognize that this was what I had to do. I had 6 months to get myself in game condition to do this, and I wasn't going to fail. And so my secret was I told everybody I was going to do this. I was going to do it. I was going to finish this thing. There was no question in my mind. And so I'll kind of cut to the chase. We show up that day. So we drove to Vermont, me and my two buddies. We get out. It's raining. We get to the base of the mountain like everybody does. And you look up, you're like, it's not so bad. It looks like the size of Tremblant. We could do this, right? And then, of course, you get in with the group of people and everybody starts to kind of look outside. And now the fog starts to clear and you see the other half of the mountain. And you're like, okay, this is going to be rough. And of course, everyone's super excited about the night. So you go through all these speakers and then you go to bed that night, but the place is just vibrating with energy. So nobody's really sleeping well. And you're at the starting line at 6 a.m. So you're there before the sun rises. So you get up, you're ready to go with 200 people, and you just start going. So the first one is beautiful. You see the sunrise. It's gorgeous. You're full of energy. And doing one hill climb feels like, oh, that was a good workout. And then you take the gondola back down, and you rinse and repeat. And so what's really interesting about all of this is, I was sharing this with you earlier, Mal, when you get off the gondola, you can turn to your left and there's like massage practitioners, there's a rest area, there's food, there's hydration, there's all the things you want. And then there's the branding board. So after every summit, you brand into this big board that you finished one because you're never finishing at the same time. So you just kind of want to see. And it's a bit cathartic to, brand yourself in for each summit you do. We got 17 of these. And so to the left is all this comfort, to the right is more pain, right? And so the trick is, just grind through, just turn right. It's a simple equation, right? One foot after the other, just turn right. So I had a plan, but I think it's the Mike Tyson phrase, right? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So
Exactly.
I wanted to do 13 day one and 4 the next morning, get a good night's rest. I figured I'd go really hard. Well, after about 9 or 10, I started to feel severe cramps in my legs, like really bad, to the point where like I was totally stiff-legged. And so I went in, I'm like, okay, well, here's what we'll do. We'll go, I had brought, magnesium oil, all this sort of stuff to loosen up my legs. Went in, put on the massage pants, figured I would like these things that are supposed to like relax your legs. I FaceTimed my kids, it was a little emotional because it was such a long day, and you knew you still had 3 more to go. Uh, I got out after I finished the call, and the worst idea ever to put on those massages. I couldn't get up. So I physically had to lift myself out of the seat in order to go to a shower to kind of roll out your legs or anything like that. They'd rented 4 condos, which were probably 3 miles down the road. So here I am going to my tent, grabbed my stuff, had a shower. I had at this point missed lunch. It was after dinner, so I said, all right, well, I've missed my meals. So now I'm chugging cup of soup as I kind of go up the hill. That was kind of my idea. What I hadn't mentioned was there was flash floods in the area. So this hill was now literally over my ankles, kind of up halfway up my calf in mud with each step. And to kind of give you an idea, as you reached out, you could actually touch where you were going to go. The vertical was incredible. So as I'm kind of going up there, I'm thinking, oh man, this is a grind, but I'm going to keep doing this. So I went in. It's now like 8 o'clock at night. I'm totally exhausted. I said I'm going to sleep for a couple hours. So I went and lied down for about an hour and a half. Got back up. Call it 10 o'clock at night. I said I got to get 2 more in. And so I went out there, put on my mud-filled shoes that were cold and wet and disgusting. And I said, all right, let's go do two more. And so I did it, and it was pitch black. I'm very fortunate. My friend Frankie brought one of those, I guess silver blankets to keep you from getting hypothermia. Because as I started to go about halfway up my first climb, it started to snow like badly. It was a full snowstorm. So we went from rain and mud to pure snow. So you're soaking wet, um, completely freezing. So I was shaking physically on my way down. Came back, finished those two climbs. Now I was left with four more in the morning. So I finished around midnight. So I went in, and we had these sort of gas heaters. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna dry my jacket on this thing, because I only brought one jacket. I actually thought it was going to be warmer rather than cold. So I lit my jacket on fire. So that was not good. So now I've got like a half-worn jacket with big holes in it. I'm soaking wet. I figure
No.
I'm going to set my alarm for 4 a.m. and I'm going to go attack this hill. So I got up at 4 a.m., tried to get some food in me. I felt so nauseous. I just wasn't feeling like myself. I said, let's go do this. Let's get it. And so I did. I went up there, and it was the hardest of all the climbs the entire weekend. 5 o'clock in the morning, you're seeing the sunrise. So that's kind of nice, but everything is in tremendous pain. So I always describe it like running a marathon, waking up the next morning with 3 hours rest, and then going to run a 5 or 6K. Like, it's your body feels like, what are you doing to me? So I finally got up, finished the first one, banged out the next one, banged out the next one. And then, as I was kind of on climb 16, I see people with these red pennies. And so this kind of innate object that really has no value, it was a penny. It said final ascent. I wanted that thing more than I wanted anything before in my life. That was the prize, because that's what you wore on your last climb up. And so I finally got it. And, I didn't realize it was a timed race, as funny as it was. So I'm taking my time on the last one. I'm taking pictures. I want to enjoy this moment, this last climb. And it was amazing. People were coming down the gondola, pounding on the glass, cheering you on. There's a total sense of community, in this event. And I made it. I just remember filming my final walk and just people clapping, and me almost kind of falling to my knees at the end. My body was broken, but I did it. And I just remember taking that gondola back. I didn't want to go with anyone else. I wanted to ride it down myself and just take it all in. And it was an emotional moment. It was one of those things where you've planned for 6 months to do this thing, and you did it. And so I got to kind of, share that moment with my friends and my family. And that was my first foray into kind of endurance work. And from there, it's taken a whole bunch of turns, but that was that story.
Wow, what possessed you to do this? My God, it sounds like torture. And listen, Rob, to be fair, I've run a marathon, I've run two half marathons, and I fought professionally in Thailand and got my nose broken. So I get it. I get the whole pain thing. I love it. But man, that's incredible.
That was
Absolutely
super fun.
incredible.
Well,
So
it
is
was
there
neat.
is there is there anything in the works for you, Rob, now? What's the next challenge?
Yeah, actually, so I'll tell you a very quick version. If you Google my name, you'll see I made the news on CBC for an unfortunate half marathon attempt. So what I did was after that event, I said, this was life changing. I need to set, one or two things on my map each and every year to go and try to achieve, and put those flags in the sand. And that's going to be my mission for the year. So if you're not trying to lose weight, you're not trying to, get the beach bod, you want to go put something out that's going to be a challenge that you have a 50-50 chance of hitting it or not. And so I'd never run before. And so I said, I'm going to do a half marathon. So did the training, got ready. Well, everybody teaches you that your mind gives up before your body. Apparently not me. So as I'm running by, Sussex in a half marathon on a very, very hot day, I full out went unconscious and went down for the count. I woke up with two U.S. Marines over top of me, because we're right in front of the U.S. Embassy, as well as a couple of OPS officers, and this very kind nurse talking me through. And so this was kind of my near-death experience. And I looked at my watch, and my heart rate said I was going 215 beats per minute,
Oh my
and I
God.
couldn't keep myself awake. And I remember her stating to me, fight for your kids, and I thought, this is going to be the end of me. And so, long and short of that, I was taken by ambulance, got 3 bags of IV. A year later, I went through all the heart testing and just realized it was overheating, dehydration, all those things. I just pushed myself too hard. But I said, I've got unfinished business here. And so that led to a little bit of a
Oh my
speaking tour,
God.
with the running room, and chatting with people there. But I went and attacked it the next year. So that was, 2020. And so virtual race like everybody else. And at 10 o'clock at night one night, I realized I was in the hunt for a sub 2 hour half marathon. And so I just kept going and I did it. And so I came into the kitchen at like, 10 o'clock at night, raised my arms up. I'm like, I did it. And my wife was like, you did what? And I said, I finished the race. And she looked at me and she goes, but aren't you going to run this and the kids were supposed to watch? And I go, mm-hmm. And so 2 days later, I ran the same race
No, come on, really?
just
Oh
for
my
them.
God, you're a
Didn't
bit
have the same
crazy, eh?
time, buddy, but that was it. And then, of course, this year with Ted, I ran the marathon, and we were fortunate to raise a bunch of money for Able to, but ran my first full marathon as well. So I'm not a runner, Mel. Like that's not my shtick, but that's what I did. So the next thing that we're planning on doing is the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge. So you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 straight hours. So another mental test for me.
Oh, hold on. 4 miles
Yep,
every 4 hours.
for 48 straight hours. So you run at
You,
8 o'clock,
do you
you run
get to
at
sleep?
midnight. Well, that's your choice, right? But I don't think you're sleeping much. So, probably call it, half an hour, 40 minutes to go and do your run, depending on what leg of the race you're in. And then from there, you get that extra time to relax and recover. And then you got to go do it again and again and again.
4 miles every 4 hours. So what's the math? How many miles are you running?
Yep. So you'll end up, so if you do 4x4x48, it ends up being, I believe it's about 76 kilometers you end up doing in a 2 day period.
Oh, Jesus. That's almost two marathons.
That's it.
Because a full marathon is what, 42.2?
That's right. You got it. So it's just under 2 marathons in 2 days.
Oh, that sucks.
You got to embrace the suck, though, my friend.
I love it, man. That's absolutely fantastic, Rob. Absolutely fantastic. So I want to open it up to the audience, of course, as I always do. If somebody has any thoughts or some questions, wouldn't be surprised if there was some financial planning questions there, but you never know. But Rob, this has been. I mean, I got to be honest. This has been, I think, the most entertaining. I mean, between you and my boxing coach, Coach Richard Atkinson, the most prolific bank robber in Canadian history. I mean, this is exciting. This is like, wow. I mean, it just doesn't stop. You realize that 90 minutes has come and gone already? I don't understand. Where'd it go? Yeah, well, it's because and that's a testament to you, Rob, because you have so much to offer, so much to give, and I guess that the one question that I really have, Rob, is that how do you find the time to do all this? How do you do it?
Well, I'll be honest with you, my friend. Like, you have to make it part of your life. You know, I'll give you a great example. My kids love riding bikes. They love going on a bike ride. And so if I'm going to get a run in, it's not that I'm only going to do one or the other. We do both. Like my little guy who's 7, told me this year he wanted to get faster. And I said, well, what do you mean by faster? He goes, well, I want to be the fastest kid in grade 3. I go, what's the race you run? He goes, well, we run, 4 times around this little track at school. So we went out there and we measured it. It was about a kilometer. And I said, all right, well, let's go practice. And I said, the only way you're going to get faster is you got to time yourself first and set the bar. So we did. And he had, a 5:30 kilometer. And he's about to collapse on the lawn out front. I said, well, we're going to do this every day, and so we go out there and he got up to 5 kilometers. And so we just retested last week. We went out to the school, we ran it again, and he shaved, I think it was 35 seconds off his time.
Wow.
So I find the integration of, family and sport and life and, consumption, you do have to measure for it, right? You do have to make sure that you've got a good routine and the schedule behind it. Otherwise, you can't leave it up to chance. I just find life is way too important to leave it up to chance. We leave a lot of stuff up to, luck, or
Yeah.
timing or hope it happens. Hope is never a plan, right? And I think if you've got a plan to say, all right, this is what we're doing tomorrow, this is what we're going to accomplish tomorrow. Like, yeah, we're still going to have time to have fun and things like that. But the best chats we have, me and my little guy, are when we're on the run. When we're out on a family bike ride together, going 14K down to, Britannia Beach and back, having an ice cream at the beach. It's not about the ice cream. It's about, getting there and back and saying we did that and
Yeah.
watching the accomplishment in my kids' eyes. So, to say, how do you do it? It really is all about just making sure that you're purposeful in the allocation of your time. I don't think it involves sacrifice. I think it involves just being purposeful. Look at your phone and see how much time you spend on your phone. There's 2 or 3 hours you can get.
Yeah. It's intent. Yeah. Being intentional with the time. And I
Mhm.
think that that's big, Rob, and I'm happy that you mentioned that. I mean, what a wonderful way to sort of close up, because I've heard this excuse time and time again. Man, I'm awfully busy, or I don't have the time. And I just love that you very, very quickly you sort of dissolve that argument about being busy and saying, no, this is about being intentional. How much time are you really wasting in the day with stuff that's not of value, whether or not it's, time on your phone or playing Candy Crush while you're on the toilet? I mean, Jesus, it's just, this is what it is. The Putti Nation said, what do you find the biggest challenge to be with helping your clients to think and plan over longer term horizons, years or decades versus months?
Yeah, it is a challenge. A lot of people have an idea, though, to be very fair, about where it is that they want to go. A lot of people have an idea. And so the bigger challenge is not to get them to think long term, it's to think in stages. What is stage one for you? What is stage two for you? What's stage three? And if the anxiety is around, let's call it how it is, long-term care, aging in place, getting sick, not being able to call my own shot, we need to have a bit in the security bucket. But at the
Yeah.
same time, we want to figure out, what about now? Everybody hears about, the best years of your life, right? The best years of your life. And I always hear people chat about, doing that in retirement. And I go, let's think in stages. If you want to travel and that's what you want to do, have you tried tasting that yet? My kids are folks who are like, I don't like tomatoes. I don't like bananas. I'm like, have you tried it? And they're like, nope. They go, then how do you know if you like it or not?
Of course.
Same rule applies to adults, in our experiences. So if you want to do something, try it. And then let's figure out if that's really what you want to do. So maybe best described as lifestyle design, and figuring out what is important to you. And then from there, we can start to think about the stages. And that allows people to really get nuts and bolts practical about what those stages look like. Because the reality is we can go to statistics. There's a lot of people who, I would argue, live a pretty heavy lifestyle early on in retirement. They've got the money and they've got the time, right? This is their first element of freedom. But we also notice 2 years after, that is the biggest level of dissatisfaction we experience in retirement because the honeymoon period's over. And from there, we want to pivot into the next stage, which is, okay, that's great that we've got the big stuff down. So the biggest tool I give people is a week at a glance calendar. And I say, fill in the things that you are going to do. So it's Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Where are you? It's Friday, it's noon. Are you watching Mel's show or are you doing something different? Right? Like this is what we should be thinking about. And if you get the little things right, if you get the day-to-day right, my gosh, you're going to conquer the big stuff. Because if you think you're going to travel, most people, 6 weeks of travel, even in retirement, 6 months in Florida, pick your idea, but it's not the whole year. So if you can kind of get the start of your day right, the end of the day right, know what you're going to do most times, fill in the blanks, and that's kind of either the curse or the gift, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, there was a wonderful quote that it reminds me of, Rob. Take care of each day and the years will take care of themselves.
Very true.
That's
Yeah, I
wonderful.
agree.
Thank you, Putti Nation, for the question. And if anybody else, before we go, would like to ask a question, please do. Rob, I can't tell you how excited I was for this. I'll conclude by saying what I did at the forefront of the show, and that's I was excited because you're my kind of guy. You're the kind of guy who pushes himself. I did the same with Muay Thai, and I went to go fight on the king's birthday in Chiang Mai, Thailand in 2002, in the biggest stadium in northern Thailand. And I happened to be the main event. And my picture was all over the city. It was my first professional fight, and I was going to be the main event because I was the white boy in Thailand. And I fought a guy with over 165 professional fights, and it was my first. So I'll tell you that I know the pain because it was a 6-hour training day for 1 year, and it was 72 kilometers of running every week. So I feel you, man. That's why I feel you. And I really love what you've done with your life and how you've decided to put it together. Again, beautiful family, beautiful wife, beautiful outlook. Taking your experience, taking your wisdom, and sharing it with others, giving back. I mean, that's a full life. I mean, Rob, what an absolute pleasure it is to be able to speak to somebody like you who really gets it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how the simplified version. You get it, bro. That's the truth. And I'm super grateful that you took the time to be with us today.
I appreciate you having me, Mel. I know we're kindred spirits, my friend, and I've been looking forward to this, and I always enjoy our dialogue. So I appreciate the opportunity to share this with hopefully a broader audience, and hopefully people took some nuggets away and some different ideas that hopefully they can implement.
Absolutely, and of course, we will definitely post the sort of copied, or the rerun of this in our social media. But just to say, Rob, just remember to leave some time next Friday for a little breaking of bread, because I would love to do that. So let's see if we can pencil that in for sure.
I love it. I'll
I'm
look
going to
forward
put you
to it.
back. Thank you. I'm going to put you backstage, Rob, just for a second as I give my final thoughts. Next, I'm going to talk about our guest next week. Just going to get out my calendar, making sure that I know who it is to make sure for sure. And thank you again, Rob. You're just one awesome guy, brother. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mel.
And there you have it, folks. Another Coffee and Biscotti show. What, are you kidding me? That was entertaining. I didn't even sit back on my chair. I mean, I was literally at the edge of my seat going, what next, Rob? I mean, this was an interview that was easy. I just got to keep asking questions like, what's next? What happened next? What did you do next, Rob? Fabulous. My friends, I've been 46 years. I've been 46 times around the sun. And I've not been impressed by many people. I'll be very honest with you. But this guy, Rob, he impresses me, man. He's really a man after my own heart. He really is. And I hope that you did take something from it. I hope that it inspired you maybe to go out and do some volunteering, to dedicate your time. Because I'm with him when it says, you know what? Don't dedicate time or money, dedicate time. Go and do some work. In the same way that my dear friend Francesco Biscotti introduced me to the outreach program and bringing lunches and doing a soft street patrol downtown Toronto, giving people lunch. What an experience it was for people to come and just feel the energy of what it's like to go and give somebody who's homeless a lunch, and put together hundreds of lunches. And I'll tell you, my friends, you know what they never noticed? How many poor and homeless people actually exist. It's actually quite remarkable. You'd walk into the Salvation Army Gateway on Jarvis Street in downtown Toronto. I would walk inside, go to the guy who has a microphone like this one, said, okay, guys, we have lunch. And there people just flood out to come and get a lunch. And what an experience for many who have come with me and said, Krumel, I have never, ever experienced. And this sense of joy that they actually did something, that they actually gave back. Absolutely wonderful. And so if today brought you nothing more than some inspiration and motivation to get you to go out after this long pandemic, to go and leverage your time to help in a cause that you believe in, something that resonates with you, something that touches your heart, then go and do it. And I'm grateful that we have people like Rob in the world who's doing exactly that. So thank you. Thank you to all my friends for joining us wherever you are in the world. Super grateful that you're here. Again, sorry for last week, but we're back on track. We're going to, and today I think our raid today is going to be, we're going to go wish a talented musician named Nuria a happy I don't know if I pronounced that right, Josh. Nuria, a happy birthday today. That's where the raid's going to be. So stick around for that. Next week on the Coffee and Biscotti Show, Crew Warren Lee, the first crew that I've had on the show. And I'll tell you this just before you go. I'm doing it because Crew Warren Lee is an awesome human being as well. And that's why, of all the people in the Muay Thai world, 25 years in the Muay Thai world, Crew Warren Lee is the guy who's going to be the Muay Thai crew that comes on the show. So I look forward to seeing you next week. If you're in Canada or maybe Ontario, I don't know, maybe this is an Ontario holiday, but enjoy the August long weekend wherever you are. Stay safe. Eat healthy, don't drink too much, and just be good to each other and go and build those meaningful relationships. Josh, take us away, my brother. Let's raid away. And to all of you, Crew Mel, signing off, baby. Peace.